this is really what we consider some of the core attributes that you should probably think about when it comes to on-site, premise, or cloud. The traditional, the mainstay is, do you want to do a large capital outlay? Do I want to go drop $100,000 on a phone system? Obviously, there's leasing models and other things that alleviate that. But generally, on-site, that requires a project, and it's a large capital outlay. Cloud obviously is monthly. I'm not telling you something that probably anybody doesn't know. Cloud's a monthly model, right? And just, I'm going to deviate for a second here. Really getting objective about this is important because the industry is telling you to go cloud, which in a lot of situations is accurate and correct. But the industry also wants to go cloud because it improves the valuation of their businesses. So keep in mind, understand the motivations out there. A monthly recurring model for a business is a 5x valuation, quite a bit more than a capital outlay model. So just something to consider. Back to the slide. Thank you. This is something big. Row number 2, right? And some people will disagree with me. This is, and I welcome that. This is just our observation. I feel we're very big on support and white glove service. I believe you have more control over your support relationship with a premise-based system. Example, you have one vendor implement a premise-based system, the support relationship doesn't work out. You have the flexibility to move on. And they're out there. There are good integrators out there that provide really good support, I promise you. I don't think they're as prevalent as we'd probably like to see that, but they are out there. And they are maybe more boutique. We consider ourselves a bit more of a boutique shop where we understand our customers' business. We understand what makes them tick. We're more of a partnership with them. Whereas cloud, let's face it, cloud, if you're going to have the resources to build out the right cloud model, this is the important piece. I believe there's the wrong and the right cloud model. There's a lot of people that are racing to spin up phone systems in the cloud and start charging you for it. Well, understand who they are. If they're small, that's also a red flag because maybe they don't have the redundancy they need. Do they have the staying power? Do they have the capital to make sure? That's really risky. We saw quite a few years ago a cloud provider stop paying their upstream bills to CenturyLink out in the Idaho market. And there was a lot of people that had phone numbers that were published for many years that were on this cloud provider. These numbers went away. And that was huge. There was businesses that disappeared because of it. So it is a risk. So if you're going to go with the right cloud provider, they need to be substantial. They need to be a carrier. They need to have the financial resources. They need to have data centers across the country. They need to have the right infrastructure, which is great on one side, but on the other side, they're big now, right? So, and carriers are an interesting topic for me, but carriers, take a carrier, right? Maybe some of you have a good carrier. Good today, bad tomorrow. Maybe they get acquired. Carriers in general have a hard time supporting just the basic services they need to when it comes to outages and SLAs and customer support. Now give them a complex phone system to manage. So again, carriers have the financial resources, and larger manufacturers do too. Like ShoreTel has a very nice cloud offering. I know Mitel and some others are doing that, but they're generally larger companies. So you lose that boutique, you lose that custom, probably high-end, high-level support that you loved with your premise-based solution provider. And now you're kind of at the mercy of the cloud provider, right? And you don't have the flexibility perhaps to move to a better support relationship. If things are going really bad and you're in the cloud, it's a lot harder to move. So that would be a benefit of the UC side. Another very common attribute to on-site is increased hands-on IT and maintenance. I mean, that's just it, right? You're managing servers, you're managing patches, you're managing security. You have equipment that you have to manage. And with the right cloud provider, you reduce or eliminate that IT. There are some cloud providers too where the end user just presses that question mark on their phone and immediately someone answers. So all the end user support gets completely offloaded. And that's huge. And so that's a cost to take into consideration when you're looking at these two, because you're going to have to continue maintaining an infrastructure with on-site, with cloud, with the right cloud provider. I always want to highlight that. It's not just cloud in general, just like it's just not premise in general. You have to have the right. Technology is great, but we're strong believers that you need to have the right partnership backing you. So that's definitely a benefit in the cloud column. Better control over disaster recovery, business continuity. So on premise, every time we talk to one of our customers, we're constantly looking at How do we have disparate network connectivity in case you lose connections to or a satellite office? How do we have local survivability? How do we have dial tone redundancy? Say we deliver a set of SIP trunks into the headquarters office and maybe it's another set of SIP trunks into their data center. How do we have a redundant call processing? So we go through a checklist with our customers from an architectural perspective, depending on how mission critical their voice is, and think of every failure scenario. What if we have a geographic disaster? What if we have earthquake at our headquarters office? How does the rest of my offices function? What if what do I have disparate relationships with carriers that I can leverage, so I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket? You can get, with the right premise-based solution, you can get very creative and you can get very granular on exactly all the different failure scenarios, because that's something we often see. Not as much now, but for a long time, people would be planning a lot of DR, disaster recovery, business continuity planning, but they wouldn't even think of their voice. They would still have this 20-year-old Avaya PBX in there that was a single point of failure with like 3 PRIs and one processor, and that was it. So we're always trying to get our customers to think of it, because it is, for many, a mission-critical application on your network, sometimes the most mission-critical. So we feel with on-site premise, you have a bit more flexibility, where in the cloud, you do have disaster recovery, you do have some continuity options, business continuity options, which I'll jump to in a little bit. For example, one is the very fact that it's in the cloud helps you. If you have a headquarter disaster, a regional office disaster, everything's in the cloud. People just repoint their DID to their soft phone, their mobile phone, or their IP phone at their home, or a different office, and away they go. So inherently, cloud has some pretty decent disaster recovery, business continuity options, but that's about where it ends, right? Other than that, it's in the cloud. You're relying on one provider. You're hoping they have disparate connections up to the PSTN. You're hoping they have redundant data centers. You hope their failover scenario works. You're kind of in hope land, right? You don't have a ton of control over that. The things you do have control over is perhaps maybe building into them with maybe an MPLS network for quality service. That's your production circuit into them, and then maybe having a different carrier and an internet backup to connect into them. So you do have some flexibility over that, but generally, when you really want to get granular about application redundancy, call processing redundancy, carrier, and all that stuff, we still feel that you're going to have a lot more flexibility on the on-site premise space model. Next, row 5. So changes in the system, right? If I want to add an office, generally I have to add a call processor. I have to add on-site dial tone connectivity and perhaps a server, whatever the particular manufacturer is. It's generally a project, right? It requires upfront investment in hardware, licensing, and software and pro services. Whereas really with the right cloud model, it's just press a button. It's a consumption model, pay as you go. I want to turn up 5 seats, I want to turn up 2 mobility seats, and I want to turn up 3 fax server seats. Boom, 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 done, and then I move on. So that's a huge benefit on the cloud side. The next piece, this area is getting a little gray too, but generally we have customers perhaps that might have a homegrown SQL database. They want to do very customized database dips in their call center to do priority routing, for screen pops and things like that, or if their applications reside on site, then obviously a premise-based system that's standards-based that's sitting on your network, you're going to have more flexibility in integrating with that data and those applications. Where the cloud, it's going to have less flexibility. Now, as you move more things into the cloud, though, so another organizational attribute you should think about, do I have a lot of my applications in the cloud? For us, example, we have a lot in the cloud. We have our email, we have our CRM, we have our help desk, all that's in the cloud. So if you have a lot of your core business applications are in the cloud, well, now with your cloud provider, we're starting to see a lot more integration. For example, ShoreTel Sky, the cloud provider, voice provider now can integrate with CRM, has a really nice Salesforce integration, also has a real nice Zendesk integration. But if we had a lot of those applications on site, then an on-site system might make more sense for us. Specialty applications, we see this a lot where we have a customer, maybe you've got 5 executives that want to roll out mobility, which is the application I'm using right now. With a premise-based solution, generally speaking, it's going to require server, a virtual server perhaps, or an appliance. It's going to require man hours, licensing. It's a project, right, to deliver a fax server or to deliver mobility, or perhaps you have an executive that wants to spin up a mini call center for whatever the business function is. It's going to be a bit more of a project and an investment on the premise side, whereas cloud, generally with the right cloud provider, you can just, again, turn it on. I want to turn on 5 seats cloud. I want to turn on 5 seats mobility. I want to turn on 5 seats of contact center. You turn it on and you use it. You're done it. You're done using it. Maybe the executives leave and that idea fleets and goes away, then you turn it off. So that's definitely a benefit for cloud solutions. And this number 8 is interesting to us, and I haven't seen it otherwise, and people might disagree with me. Generally, if you're looking not at soft costs, because CFOs don't care about soft costs generally, from what we've seen, but when hosted voice came out initially, that was the selling point. Oh, it's going to be a lot less expensive. But if generally, if you're looking at the project, you should be looking at least a 5-year TCO, total cost of ownership. And generally speaking, with premise, you're going to have a tangible less TCO, lower TCO, because I own it and I own it, right? We have customers that have implemented ShoreTel 10 years ago, and they've just kept turning on their support and their software, and they have all the newest UC features, but they're not paying $2,000 a month for that service, or $3,000 or $4,000 a month. Whereas obviously with cloud, you do the math, right? You're paying $2,000, $3,000 a month for 5 years or 36 months, and you still don't own anything. Generally, there's a breaking point where your TCO is going to be a lot higher on the cloud side. But that does not take into consideration, and this is something you got to also calculate, is IT resources. When you're figuring that out, do I need to add bodies and training to maintain my premise system, whereas I don't on my cloud side? So that is a tangible cost that if you can get your CFO to look at, that would be something to consider as you evaluate that. Some of the no-brainers, hardware and software become obsolete, right? I spin up servers to host my call processing application and my UC applications, servers or voice appliances, whatever the case is, that generally becomes obsolete. Whereas in the cloud, you don't really have to deal with that because that's up to them. Yes, they're constantly making upgrades and they're making those changes, but that's really this doesn't concern you. You just know that you have the latest and greatest all the time, and it's up to the cloud provider to keep their systems up to date and non-obsolete. This is another big one. So you do have, with most cloud providers, depending on the cloud provider, you do have control over things like call flow and auto attendance, and how I set up my voicemail and schedules and some basic high-level stuff, and you're going to have a decent amount of flexibility. But for our customers that have a very specific, more complex needs when it comes to call flow and priority routing and all the other things that they, the overflow and things like that, you might start seeing that fall off on the cloud side, some of the flexibility. Because remember, the cloud provider has under the hood, they have a lot of flexibility, but they're not going to give that to you. You're just a tenant on their system, so they're going to give you, say, maybe you get 70% of the administration flexibility on a cloud solution. I'm just throwing these numbers out here, where obviously you get 100%. You own it on a premise-based solution. So depending on your organization and how unique the configuration system administration requirements are, that might be something to consider as you look at the different models. This is another one. On-site premise communications generally can be more difficult to predict. Your CFO comes to you and says, hey, we want, the business is requiring us propping up 3 more offices. What is that going to cost? I don't know. What's the project look like? How many hands? What about the network? Do I need servers on site? How is that going to look? How many analog lines do I need to connect to? It's generally less predictable. It's less linear, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's doable, but it's less linear, whereas cloud, you can say, how many seats? Well, I'm going to have 10 seats of that office. Okay, 10 times 30 is X per month. Do we need an operator? Are there any call center? Okay, well, that's, so generally a lot easier to predict and budget, which is nice. Premise-based solutions, we are far and away easier to troubleshoot, maintain if you have the skill set or you have the right partner to back you, right? So if we have customers that are having call quality issues, can we get in, look really truly under the hood and look at things like packet loss and jitter and delay? Can we look at, is it a DHCP issue, or is it a SIP handoff issue, a handshaking issue, or are we dealing with why is DTMF not happening, and what's choking out DTMF, and what do the codecs look like? And again, these are things that we have a lot more visibility and we have the tools to really understand that. Whereas with your cloud provider, they too have those tools, but you'll never see them, and you're going to have to open up a trouble ticket and you're going to have to escalate to really understand that, which might be just fine for you. But generally, you're going to have a limited visibility in system health. They're going to say, yeah, your image looks good, and it looks like the entire system is done, right? Again, I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm sure people might be shaking their head saying, no, my cloud provider actually provides a lot more in-depth perhaps. But from what we've seen generally, if you're really wanting to dig under the hood and pick it apart and really understand what's happening, you're going to have more visibility with the right premise-based solution generally, and the right tool set and the right vendor or partnership to look at those things. Upgrades can be more impactful on the premise side. That just requires hardware upgrades, software upgrades, downtime, staff involvement, scheduling outages, etc. Generally, with the right cloud provider, that should be fairly seamless. You shouldn't notice it. Upgrades should be happening if their infrastructure is built correctly, really without your users being affected. So that's definitely a positive in the cloud side. And this is just me kind of talking the backside of business continuity. I talked about this before, where depending on how it's designed, you can build a lot of disaster recovery and business continuity on a premise solution if you lose, say, your headquarters office. You have a geographical or outage, like an earthquake or a global or a significant power outage or something like that. But generally, people put their phone system on their site. Maybe they use that as a hub spoke, and the remote sites connect back into that. I would talk to us. We'd recommend perhaps some other topology considerations. But with cloud, that's kind of just a non-issue. All my sites connect into the cloud, and my Portland office goes offline, no problem. I just reroute my Portland numbers over to my Phoenix office because Phoenix is up and running and everything's in the cloud. And if I lost the West Coast and I had the right cloud provider, then my image or my tenant should automatically be available in the cloud's New York data center or Midwest data center, whatever the case is, and away I go. So again, if you have the right cloud provider, that's going to be less of an issue. And this is what I was talking about before. This is I'm foreshadowing a little bit into the next white paper and webinar series. But we have a lot of customers that perhaps, whatever the case might be, they have a lot of disparate phone systems. I have NEC at these offices. I have Mitel at these offices. I have ShoreTel at these offices. And maybe there was no standardization in how procurement was handled, or perhaps there was an acquisition frenzy, and now you have all the systems you're maintaining. Generally, we would say let's standardize on that. And let's, from a premise model, but what if you can't? And what if call center is a big part of your business and you want to have agents perhaps at each one of these offices, and you want them to have a common desktop experience, and you want seamless call routing between offices when people call your customer service center, and you want to start leveraging resources? Well, this is a really great way to get your foot in the cloud world, and that might be let's implement a cloud contact center, call center, contact center. Call center is the old word where now it's contact center, because instead of just voice, now people are expecting to communicate with the organization with web and email and SMS and other ways of communicating. Well, regardless, let's look at a cloud overlay. Let's take all of your main 800 numbers, your customer service numbers, let's port them into a cloud call center. And as long as I can hit your agents with a DID that are on these legacy PBXs, I don't care if this one's NEC or this one's Avaya or whatever the case is, because I'm distributing those to the cloud contact center. All they're doing is ringing agents DID. It could be their cell phone, it could be their home phone, it wouldn't matter. And so now I can have my main 800 number call in. It can ring my Portland agents. If they don't answer, I can overflow to my Phoenix agents. I can do skills-based routing. All my agents, although they have different handsets, legacy crusty old handsets on their desk, now they have a desktop tool that is common across all sites. Or perhaps they throw their handset away and they're just using a soft phone that connects back in to the cloud contact center. So that wasn't really a pro and con. That's just an idea to think about, especially as we're getting into the hybrid stuff.